Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. Like I say at the beginning of every episode, if you like what you've been hearing, or even if it's your first time, make sure you hit subscribe so you can stay up to date with all the best stuff that we're bringing to you. And remember, if you want to support the podcast, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. We got different tiers for you, even if you just want to help support the podcast. There's lots of different options for everyone out there. Now today, I'm going to be marking algorithms. I want to get on top of everything. I want to be on the pulse of everything. And today I'm going to be reviewing the Snyder Cut of the Justice League movie, baby. Because you know what? It's happening. And people are talking about it. And you know what? I hope they restore the Snyderverse. I hope this is just one more thing that keeps help pushing that towards restoring that Snyderverse, baby. And hey, if no one's ever heard of this stuff, listen up, babies. We got a great educational podcast for you today. So a little bit of history about this whole Justice League thing. It's part of the DCEU. So the DC comic book company are making movies as well. Just like Marvel, they made all those Avengers movies, Iron Man, the Hulk, all that good stuff. DC did the same thing. So DC started with Man of Steel, which is a Superman movie that was directed by Zack Snyder. So Zack Snyder is known for directing 300. He also directed the movie The Watchmen. Actually, he's working on directing potentially a movie based on The Fountainhead, which is an Ayn Rand vehicle. Very, very great book. That'll be reviewed in Bigmark's book club on the Patreon, actually. That'll be one of the books we'll talk about, because really interesting about actually this architect who's kind of like a lone wolf and goes against the whole thing. But anyway, we won't go too far into that. So Zack Snyder started with Man of Steel. Henry Cavill played Superman. And then he also directed Batman versus Superman. And Zack Snyder had this big plan, again, called the Snyderverse, or nicknamed the Snyderverse, about this big plan for all these movies and on all these adaptations of the comics that was going to come up. Unfortunately, there was a death in the Snyder family. So during the filming of this new Justice League movie, which was going to be, the Avengers, the DC's version of Avengers, essentially. So there was unfortunately a death in the Snyder family. So Joss Whedon actually took over. So Joss Whedon was the Avengers director. So, when they were looking for a new director, they were kind of going, hey, who's the perfect director than this Joss Whedon guy, because he's already directed the Avengers. And unfortunately, Batman versus Superman didn't do very well in the box office. It was kind of a darker movie than DC was. Warner Brothers are the people who are actually making these movies too, and making a lot of the big decisions. But DC kind of, and Warner Brothers wanted it to be a little bit more of a lighthearted movie anyway. So they went with this Joss Whedon character just to kind of make things lighter. Again, because of those more negative views of Batman vs. Superman. But that was it was one of these movies, a part of this Snyderverse that was supposed to be building. And so unfortunately, the Whedon cut that was released, or the theatrical version that was actually released in 2017, was just missed the boat in general. I don't know how else to say it nicely. It just didn't hit the mark. There was a lot of really weird reshoots that Whedon did. Henry Cavill, who plays Superman, he was contractually obligated to keep a mustache for another movie. So he had a mustache on his face for another movie that he couldn't shave off. So when they did these reshoots, Superman, who doesn't have a friggin' mustache, they had to CGI this mustache off Henry Cavill's face, and it just looked awful. And they just played it off like it was normal. They kind of made Batman seem like an idiot. Like he was kind of like the comic relief of the movie, which usually Batman's the most dark, the darkest dude, and he's not usually funny. It was just, you could tell that Joss's new version, he just didn't really, he wasn't with it from the start. So he kind of just took this project and just kind of pasted things back together. Like you can even tell, like when you watch the Snyder cut, there's certain like CGI like scenes that you can tell that were just re-rendered into this whole new thing that barely fit. They kind of cookie cuttered things in. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense. Again, the Snyder, Snyder was after Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman. Basically the DC EU or the DC Extended Universe exists with Suicide Squad, which is another movie, Wonder Woman, the original Justice League, Aquaman, Shazam, Birds of Prey, and now there's a new Wonder Woman movie. That's all these movies that have already come out. And, you know, they kind of follow things. It's pretty interesting. Shazam's not a bad movie in general. It kind of just, you know, that's just how they're kind of building the Justice League, because all those characters actually in the comics exist in the Justice League. So usually it's funny. It's just like the Avengers. The Justice League's going to have a different lineup almost every time. But classically speaking, you're talking Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash is involved. They put Cyborg. He's more of a newer addition. But that's like kind of Teen Titans stuff. So they kind of added him in. And you know, Martian Manhunter. He's another classic character. But yeah, so that's usually the Justice League. So just like Marvel was doing, putting the different movies, each character kind of had a solo movie. For instance, Iron Man or Captain America. You know, they gave themselves a lot of pre-context and all this backstory. So when they did create these Marvel movies, you kind of knew about so much about these characters. The most unfortunate thing about the Snyder Cut is that Zack Snyder didn't get to actually set up all these movies. So he wanted to have a Cyborg solo movie. He wanted to have a Flash solo movie before, just to set them up so they didn't have to take the time to actually explain it in the Justice League movie. And speaking of time, that's actually one of my cons about this movie. I don't actually have too many gripes about this movie, to be truthfully honest, but it's 4 hours long. The runtime is 4 hours, and that's so long that you're not really going to keep anyone's attention that long. And like, unless you're really diehard and really interested, like, if you've never seen any of the movies, I feel like it would be tough for someone to sit down and be like, all right, I'm going to give 4 hours. I mean, obviously you can watch it in parts. It is split into parts, like they're kind of chapters in the movie. But again, 4 hours is ridiculous. It's really just Zack Snyder is just able, it's a project that he just got to do whatever he wanted. It's a director's dream. You know what I mean? They get to just do whatever they want. So obviously it's going to be really long. You don't want to cut out all this stuff. If Snyder did get his way, he was planning on doing a Cyborg solo movie, like I said. He was going to do a Batman movie with Ben Affleck as Batman again. Deathstroke, which is a really interesting villain character that does come up in the Snyder Cut. And the Atom, which is basically DC's version of Ant-Man. He was going to do another Justice League 2. He was going to do, and a third. He was going to do another Man of Steel movie. And then there's a David Ayer Suicide Squad cut that is unreleased and apparently much better and like crazy darker. Like the only reason why the Suicide Squad was almost like Deadpool is because the Ayer cut was like scared the shit out of Warner Brothers apparently. Like they were like, this is too dark, we can't release this, all this stuff, right? So it's pretty interesting. But before I will say this just for everyone listening, if you have not seen this, there's going to be major spoiler alerts. We're going to go through this whole thing basically. So right now I think there hasn't been many. If you stop now, go watch it if you got 4 hours, and then come back and listen. We'll go through it together. But anyway, the Snyder Cut is essentially a completely different movie from the 2017 Joss Whedon Justice League. There's a lot of the same elements, obviously a lot of the same characters, but there's even extra characters that Warner Brothers completely took out. There were some characters that Warner Brothers didn't even let in the Snyder Cut. So I don't know what their plan is. I don't know if they're thinking they just want more movies out of it. I'm not really sure what the overarching idea is. But anyway, with that time, as much as I don't like it being so long, it does give all those characters a lot of time, where in certain movies you think like, oh, one or two characters are getting the kind of the lion's share of all the screen time. I found that, you know, they gave a lot of time to each character, which was really nice. And Batman wasn't a bumbling idiot, like I mentioned before in the Whedon cut. You know, he was classic Batman, smart, and he has a wit to him. Like, there's always that's the thing with Batman. There is an essence of comedy in the Batman comics. Like, even look at Joker; it's a really dark comedy, but there is an essence of smart. There's a smartness to it. So, but thank goodness he's not as much of an idiot as he was in the Whedon cut, which is really, really interesting. Anyway, so the movie basically starts with Superman dying. So in Batman versus Superman, Superman gets killed by Doomsday, while Superman is simultaneously killing Doomsday. And basically, with Superman dying, he's like, his like, he's like yelling as he's dying, his like cry in pain, his death cry, or whatever you want to call it, essentially opens up these mother boxes that exist around the world. So essentially these mother boxes were created by this ancient technology, and they're known as change engines. So they can basically manipulate matter. In an ancient battle, they were hidden all over Earth. And with Superman dying, it kind of wakes up these boxes somehow, which is kind of interesting. And they're in different places on Earth. One of them is in the Themyscira, which is where the Amazons live, like Wonder Woman. One of them's in Atlantis, like with Aquaman. And then one of them was hidden with men, and it's actually currently, at the time in the movie, it's currently in Metropolis. So these three mother boxes, when you put them together, they form something called the Unity, which essentially is like an ultimate weapon. And it'll just allow you to, if you can change anything into matter, or you can manipulate matter, you can basically do anything. And essentially the villains in the movies want to get a hold of this and do evil with it, and then, you know, the good guys are trying to prevent them from doing this. It's actually funny. The boxes in the movie, they're these big black boxes, but if you look at them, they kind of have this iridescent finish. And if anyone's watched the Superman Lives podcast that we've done, that was one of the things about the resurrection suit that Tim Burton wanted, was this iridescent kind of soap bubble finish, which it kind of looked like on the boxes, which I think maybe is like an interesting callback. I would like to ask Zack Snyder that, actually. I know he's watching, so let me know, Zack, and get back to me. But anyway, so these machines are starting to kind of wake up, essentially, and starting to move, where they've been, for thousands of years, they've been kept quiet. No one really knows about them. So during this whole thing, obviously the world is mourning Superman's death. Superman has just died. No one thought that was even possible. Generally speaking, everyone's more or less bummed from that, obviously, right? Because it's freaking Superman, and now he's dead. So everyone's kind of like disheartened. Actually, Kent Farm even gets repossessed. The bank takes Superman's family farm away from him, away from his mom, because his dad died, and now it's brutal. Lois Lane, Superman's girlfriend, isn't working because she's so depressed. She's not being a journalist anymore, and she's just like super sad, lying in bed and shit. Super brutal. And anyway, that's this big setup that the world is just like bummed that there's no more hero, and that whole idea that now the world is much more vulnerable and everyone's kind of getting scared. So back in Batman versus Superman, there's a scene where Flash, Barry Allen, comes back, and Batman saw it as a vision, but it's actually Flash coming back through time. So he's going from the future into the past to try and find Bruce Wayne to tell him to create the Justice League. And it's a really cool scene, and he comes in and he's like, oh, and Batman's watching him, and he's like, clearly Batman's sitting there going like, what the fuck? And Barry Allen's going like, oh no, am I too soon? He's like, shit, I'm too soon. Like, because Batman's like, what are you talking about, right? So anyway, he's like, you got to find us and like bring us together. So build the Justice League essentially. And so that happened in Batman versus Superman, and then basically Bruce is now the guy who's going to bring everyone together. So he's the guy responsible for putting the Justice League together. Batman also really feels super bad for trying to kill Superman, right? In the previous movie, he kind of learns that, because essentially in Batman versus Superman, Bruce Wayne is scared that Superman, because he's ultimately powerful, that if he becomes corrupted, like, we're all done. So he was really terrified of that happening. So that was basically the whole basis of Batman versus Superman. Then all of a sudden, Superman tells Batman that his mom's name's Martha, and that was also Batman's mom's name. And it was just this whole weird scene where all of a sudden he's like, oh, you know, he's more human than I thought, I guess. It was just, I never really got to the bottom of it, but it totally changed Batman's tune as far as, you know, who Superman was. And he made this huge sacrifice to save the world and everything. So you gotta love the guy. But Batman obviously feels bad. So as he starts to recruit the team, he already has Wonder Woman on the team, because she knows about all these metahumans. They're called. That's what they call superheroes. It's interesting in the DC universe, they try to make things a little bit more real. Marvel, there's a little bit more of a suspension of disbelief where DC tries to be like, hey, this is kind of, what would a superhero be like in real life? So anyway, they don't even call them superheroes, they call them metahumans. Anyway, so Diana knows about all these metahumans, so Wonder Woman's involved. They're trying to find Flash. They have like this footage of Flash. They have this footage of Aquaman, so they know that these people exist, and Cyborg too. They know that these people exist, but they're trying to recruit them. Bruce goes to try and find Aquaman. Aquaman tells him to fuck off, essentially. He's just like, I'm not interested, because Aquaman's got beef going on with his home Atlantis, and he kind of doesn't want to have anything to do with it. He's kind of a rebel character, kind of jokes, pretty interesting. Bruce does find Barry Allen, though, who is known as the Flash, and recruits him, and basically the Flash, for anyone who doesn't know, has this access to the Speed Force, which is, he explains it as like a sub-layer of reality, which he can, if he goes fast enough, he can manipulate space-time. And he is considered one of the most powerful superheroes in all of comic books, because he can go so fast, he can go back in time. So even unless he's somehow defeated, and even if you can catch him because he's so fast, he can potentially go back in time and just erase everything you've done. So anyway, Diana, aka Wonder Woman, also goes and tries to recruit Cyborg, who's another character, again, is kind of newer in the DC universe, but at least a little bit more popular as of late. He was in the Teen Titans series as well, and he's actually really cool because he is directly related to one of these mother boxes. They've written that in as the writers, which is a pretty cool callback. But anyway, while all this is happening, the mother boxes are essentially calling to this villain named Steppenwolf. So he's from the comics. But he's a subject of this dude Darkseid. So Darkseid is kind of like the Thanos of the DC world. He's this big, huge character, super powerful. But this dude Steppenwolf basically betrayed Darkseid or something, and he owes him all these worlds, 50,000 worlds or something, and he's supposed to usurp all these worlds. So Darkseid's going around trying to take over these worlds Steppenwolf is trying to take over these worlds for Darkseid, and basically Darkseid is trying to find this thing called an anti-life equation. So the anti-life equation is essentially a transcendental mathematical formula originally said to allow those who knew it to dominate the will of any sentient race. It implants a mathematical certainty that all life is hopeless, and that freedom and hope are futile concepts. So again, if you want to take over a world, this is basically what you want. Darkseid in the DC universe, anyway, in the extended universe, Darkseid has been searching for this anti-life equation, and he's actually come to Earth in the past. And there was a battle about that we'll go into in a second. But in the movie Steppenwolf, in the first theatrical trailer, the Joss Whedon cut, Steppenwolf is brutal. He is, like, you can tell they've really dumbed him down as a character. He almost has like a Bane-like voice. You can kind of not really understand him. But it's just dumbed down. There's no real backstory to the character. Like I said, that whole thing about the worlds that didn't really exist in the original cut. And it's kind of just like, it was just a poor character where it was hard to believe that this guy was kicking all these superheroes' asses, like, no problem. Steppenwolf is essentially trying to find all these mother boxes to create the Unity to destroy the world for one of those debts, right? One of those, the 50,000 worlds that he owes, right? Now that there's no, what he says, no lanterns and no Kryptonians. So Superman's dead, so no Kryptonian, and I guess because there's no Green Lanterns, which is a cool little hint that eventually there's going to be some Green Lanterns, but the world is vulnerable, essentially. Earth is vulnerable, so that's why Steppenwolf is more or less showing up. So the first real kind of like time you see Steppenwolf is him showing up in Themyscira to get the first mother box from the Amazonians. So this is Wonder Woman's crew, and man, he just completely runs show. Like, it's a big, like, kind of like show of power. Like, he's just like bodying horses and stuff. The guy's huge. The guy's like 8 feet tall and stuff, like monster essentially, and just goes off and kind of just snatches the mother box more or less away from the Amazonians, sadly. And he brings it to like a kind of like a Chernobyl type place. Like, it's clearly like supposed to be Chernobyl, but it's not. It's like an old blown out nuclear facility somewhere. And he uses the radiation in the nuclear facility to create like a base, a big stronghold, more or less, because every bad guy needs a lair. So again, while all this is happening, Aquaman is kind of like, shit, like, what the hell's going on? Volko, who is one of Aquaman's basically teachers from when he was a kid, he's an Atlantean dude, played by Willem Dafoe, actually. He's trying to get Arthur, aka Aquaman, to come back to Atlantis to protect the mother box, because he knows that Steppenwolf is coming to try and take the mother box. So Volko's trying to get Arthur to help, and Arthur is just not down. Again, this guy's clearly a friggin' rebel, and he's just not interested. So anyway, you know, I mentioned that ancient battle where Darkseid kind of came back, like, from way back. Diana actually goes and finds like this kind of like hidden layer, and it like shows this whole story of Darkseid, which at the time was known as Uaxis, but I don't think that's really like in the DC universe. I think they're just sticking with Darkseid, but he came to Earth to try and find this anti-life equation like thousands of years ago, and he fought like all the old gods like Zeus and Ares and Artemis and Poseidon. And Zeus is actually in the DC universe, Zeus is Wonder Woman's father, so she has like the powers of the old gods in her. So Darkseid's essentially looking for this anti-life equation. He gets defeated. He actually gets a friggin' nice chop in the neck from good old Ares, and then he flees Earth, and the people of Earth essentially take these mother boxes and hide them. So they give one to the men of Earth and they hide it. They give one to Atlantis and they hide it in Atlantis. They give one to Themyscira, the Amazons, and they hide it there. It's got a little Lord of the Rings vibe to it. But anyway, so they all hid them. So this is where Steppenwolf is now looking. He's looking for all these boxes that have been hidden for thousands of years. Essentially, this is why everyone's tripping, because these boxes are waking up after Superman died from being asleep for thousands of years, at least almost all of them. So while Diana's kind of recounting the story, Steppenwolf is still on the move. He's going hard. He's going hard for that second box. And he's interrogating these Atlanteans. So he goes down to Atlantis, pulls these dudes up, and is trying to find trying to find, and they're like, no way I'm going to tell you. And basically he has this device that like goes like crawls on their forehead and like can project their consciousness, so it can like project like their memories. And it's kind of funny because it's a little bit reminiscent, like the device kind of looks like a starfish, and it's reminiscent of this character named Starro, which was in the comics one of Justice League's first villains, was this giant starfish alien thing that would throw these small mind control starfish on people's faces. This is funny, again, this is written in the 60s, but they would, like, as soon as you got one of these starfish on your face, it would control your mind. So very similar, again, probably a little bit of a nod from Snyder to the original, one of the original Justice League villains, which is super cool. Apparently in one of the in the Suicide Squad movie that's coming up, Starro looks like he might be one of the villains, which is pretty interesting. Anyway, so he finds out with the use of this device, he finds out where it is in Atlantis, and while the box is getting attacked by Steppenwolf, Aquaman shows up. I guess he changes his mind at the last minute, and he goes and tries and helps Mera, who is like kind of like the to-be queen of Atlantis. I guess she's the king of Atlantis' daughter, and eventually Mera and Arthur get it on for sure in the comics, but at this point they're not really together, and they're kind of like fighting, but Arthur's there. He's down to help. At least Atlantis, and see what he can do. Unfortunately, Steppenwolf takes out Mera and Aquaman and steals the mother box. So now, if everyone's counting, Steppenwolf has 2 mother boxes, 2 for 3. He's 2 for 3 people. So he takes one of these boxes back to his like kind of Chernobyl base, and one thing that I noticed that was actually kind of cool about the movie, so it looks like the old blown out core of the nuclear plant. He basically puts the mother boxes into them. They kind of meld in again because they can resort matter, and essentially he uses this thing to like communicate with his like higher officers. So like, you know how I said he's like a subject? There's like a hierarchy apparently from Darkseid down that he's communicating this with this one guy, Desaad, who's like kind of like basically Darkseid's like bitch boy. But it's kind of cool. It's like he like comes through this like blown out core, and it's kind of like looks like molten metal. And anyway, really, really interesting. I thought it was a cool idea. I'm assuming from the Snyder crew to do that kind of communication that way, which I thought was super cool, instead of just some weird hologram. You know, they always do like some weird hologram, or like even just like a weird like floating head. You know, they always used to do that big screen, right? So I thought that was a cool thing. Anyway, so the third mother box, we're all wondering where it is. It actually was found in World War II by the American military in Germany somewhere, and they dug it up because they always talk about this in the comics, but it's actually true to life. Hitler was actually really interested in the occult, and we'll actually do a podcast on it, but Hitler, the Nazi interest in the occult and like kind of trippy stuff like witchcraft and stuff was actually super, super interesting. They really, really wanted to like basically figure out magic and stuff and noetic science and really, really trippy stuff that they're just, again, trying to gain an advantage in the war, and they would stop at nothing, and they were just looking into like some trippy stuff at the time. Anyway, in the comics, they kind of take that and run with it, obviously. So they say that the American government found this mother box, and then they just put it on ice. They just kept it in a warehouse for time until a Kryptonian ship crashed in Metropolis, which happened during the Man of Steel movie. So Krypton, again, where Superman's from, during the whole movie, there's these other Kryptonians that actually show up and they challenge Superman. It's this really interesting thing, but they actually crash this giant alien ship in downtown Metropolis, which is basically like LA more or less in the comic books, or might be like New York City, but Gotham's kind of more like New York. So that depends on how you look at it. But crashes this huge building, and so now we have all these scientists working on this ship trying to figure it out, right? Because it's alien technology. We're going to try and figure out how it works, try and re-engineer it. And one of the scientists somehow finds out about this box and thinks that the technology is either similar or there's something about this box that might help them actually understand the ship a lot more, because they kind of think they know what their mother box, or they call it change engine. They think they kind of know how it works. But again, this guy starts doing all this research, and this guy's named Silas Stone, and Silas Stone is actually Victor Stone's father, who is Cyborg. So while Stone is using the box to study the Kryptonian ship, his son actually is like a star football player and like a genius kid in school. He gets in a car accident on his way home from a game, and his mom dies in the crash, and he gets like horribly injured to the point where he's probably not going to make it. But his dad gets a hold of him and uses the mother box to reanimate him. Somehow figures out a way to wake up the box, and the box kind of just goes on its own. It has like its own type of intelligence, I guess, and will, and it goes to Victor and like kind of rebuilds him, and that's how you get Cyborg. Is that is actually built from one of these mother boxes. His whole body is created, so he's like a synthesis kind of this technology, and it's pretty interesting because Diana, when she's recounting the story, she mentions the boxes are a science that's so advanced that it's mistaken as sorcery, which I thought was such an interesting thing, because I think that speaks to this larger kind of thing where science and spirituality kind of isn't always congruent, but one is just speaking another language, and eventually we can get to a point with science that it's so advanced that it's going to seem like magic. Even today, even if you took a phone back 100 years, let's say, and you showed someone a phone, it would seem like sorcery. But anyway, I always thought that was an interesting line. But so Silas uses this, he creates Cyborg, and then there's obviously a bit of a Frankenstein vibe to the whole thing, right? You know, Victor's he doesn't really know what to do. The suit is almost changing every day. It's kind of evolving with him. He doesn't really know, he hasn't really honed his powers. Let's just put it that way. And I mean, in the story Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, it talks about the monster that Frankenstein creates. He's totally aware of who he is, and he knows that he's different, and there's something that he has inside him, or that he's been created, that it's just there's something that doesn't feel right, or he has to get used to this power. And because there's kind of an internal struggle between Victor and his father. I mean, again, you know, your father basically brought you back from the dead, and you don't really know what's even happening to you, and he doesn't even really know. But eventually his father gets to explain to him that he kind of has these powers that allow him to like tap into like every bit of technology on the planet he can tap into. There's no firewalls that's going to stop him. He can get on every satellite. He can crack into every system. Nothing can hold him back. He has he can communicate with technology. Like, he comes up to a ship that's not flying. He goes, like, she wants to fly. So there's some type of communication he has that's past the physical, which is super, super cool. And again, that's his relationship to the mother box, which is really interesting. Again, just as the Snyder Cut goes into a lot about Cyborg, but again, Snyder wanted to do a solo before, so we could have gone all of this in a solo movie, and it wouldn't have taken up all this time in the Snyder Cut, which is funny because I didn't even mention this at the beginning. Basically, the reason why we have the Snyder Cut is because of a hashtag. So basically, people figured out that the Whedon cut wasn't the only cut available, and that Snyder actually made a movie already. They just changed it so much that literally the whole comic book universe just tweeted and posted stuff to restore, and they actually did it. So that's even why we even have it, which is funny. But again, things could have been a lot different if Snyder kind of got to do his whole thing. And again, very similar to the Flash too. There's so much more story about the Flash in this one. Much more backstory. His father's in jail, which was covered in the original one, but his father's in jail for a crime that he knows he didn't commit. it's the murder of Barry's father, or sorry, the murder of Barry's mother. So Barry's dad is in jail for the murder of his mother, which he knows he didn't commit, and Barry's trying to get a part of the crime lab in Central City, which is the city he's from. He's trying to become a part of the crime lab to actually start to get into the justice system and try and help his father out of prison. So again, a little bit more story from that. Some really, really cool scenes. It really, basically the whole Justice League kind of puts Flash as one of the main heroes, really. I mean, they're all part of this heroic team, but the Flash, man, what he does in this movie is amazing. Where in the original Justice League or the Whedon cut, Joss was more like, he's a dweeb. He's kind of a nerd. He's an outcast, and he's not really, a heroic type. He's going to be in there and he's going to help out, but he's not really going to be the man. Where I think Snyder really changed that up and kind of put him more or less in the forefront, which is really interesting. So again, while this is happening, Steppenwolf is still on the move, man. The guy does not sleep. He kidnaps a bunch of scientists trying to find this third mother box, including Silas Stone. So he kidnaps Cyborg's dad. So Cyborg knows about it. They actually go and meet with Commissioner Gordon in Gotham, who's Batman's bro. And Cyborg, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Flash try and go and save all these scientists that are actually all being hidden. They're hidden somewhere in Gotham City. Anyway, they end up underneath Gotham Harbor, and Steppenwolf is essentially like interrogating these scientists to try and get the information out of them. So that's kind of when the first big fight with Steppenwolf kind of happens with the main characters. They're kicking ass, and basically Batman has like this, Batman always has some type of vehicle, and it like shoots a rocket at Steppenwolf. And again, they're underneath Gotham Harbor, so they're in like a giant, like they're underground in these big kind of tubes. Steppenwolf just lets go of this rocket because he catches it and he lets go of it into the wall and then portals out, because that's basically how Steppenwolf moves in and out. He's got this crazy alien portal, which is super cool. But this rocket takes out this wall, and obviously mad water starts coming in, and everyone's like, oh shit, what are we gonna do? And guess who comes to save the day? Obviously our boy Aquaman, because it's mad water. So he comes in, he stops the water from friggin' crushing everyone, and that's him saying, okay, I'm with the team. So that's kind of cool. The Justice League still have, or whatever's left of the Justice League right now, they still have the mother box, which is great. They kind of thought that Steppenwolf tried to get it, but they kept him away from it, which is awesome. And they decide to use it to reanimate Superman, because they know it can rearrange matter. And essentially they dig up Superman, they put him into this Kryptonian ship, and they just need enough power to actually put through the box to wake it up, to then bring Superman back to life. So when Flash runs, this is from the comics too, when Flash runs, he creates a exorbitant amount of static electricity. So that's where a lot of his kind of power comes from, because he's running and his friction. There's a lot of static electricity that he can discharge into enemies and opponents and stuff. But essentially he says when he gets close to the speed of light, he can create a lot of energy. He said, funny things happen to time when I get that close to the speed of light, but I'll be able to create enough energy to wake the box up. So as Flash is about to wake up the box, Victor, aka Cyborg, is communicating with the ship, and the ship is saying, this is a bad idea, don't wake up Superman, like this goes against the rules kind of thing. You can't just like bring back someone from the dead. Anyway, and they're kind of ignoring it. And while this is happening, Cyborg actually has this crazy apocalyptic vision of like Superman killing everyone, essentially coming back, and it's him that actually murders everyone. So really, really weird vision. And Cyborg's kind of tripping, and at one point it kind of sounds like he says, like, his Flash is ready to run, and he's waiting for them to say go, And at one point, it kind of sounds like Cyborg says no instead of go, but Flash says, like, Cyborg goes, like, no, or whatever he says. And then Flash goes, go? Like, what? And then he just goes. So, like, it's trippy. They don't really explain that part anymore in the movie. But when I first watched it, I was like, did he say no? And then Flash said, fuck it anyway. Because Flash is so quick, he'd be there before they even blink their eye. Anyway, it's really cool when Flash is running. The box is kind of dropping towards Superman, and Barry is running so fast that the box starts to kind of go the other direction. And it's really cool. It starts to be like, oh man, I guess he can kind of run back in time. Anyway, touches the box, puts all that energy into it, wakes up Superman. Superman fucking basically trips out, flies out of the thing immediately, and essentially Superman... hold on now. Let me just... I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here. Okay. So, basically, while all this is happening, there's a scene where Lois Lane, again, still being bummed, she's chilling at home, and Martha Kent shows up at her door. So Superman's mom, aka her like mother-in-law, more or less, shows up at the door. She tells her about the house being repossessed, super sad. But basically Martha's there to say, listen, Lois, you got to get back out there. You know, you have a gift. You need to be a journalist and be who you are, and you can't, because you're so sad, you can't just stay. It's relatively inspiring. And Lois is ready to go and stuff. But as Martha Kent leaves, you see her all of a sudden turn into her skin changes, turns into this, and she turns into Martian Manhunter. So it's super cool. It's the first time we've ever seen him in a movie, or sorry, not in any movie, but it's the first time we've seen him in the DC universe's movies. And really interesting. He's actually a character that's been in the other movies that we had no idea about. And the thing about Martian Manhunter is he's like a chameleon guy. He can change his skin. He can be whatever he wants to be. So it'll be interesting how they write him basically back into the story, because they can more or less say, he was anyone, because he can kind of change his skin. And he's been around forever. Really cool. They call him the last son of Mars, and Superman's the last son of Krypton. So that was a really interesting character to introduce for sure. So basically, obviously, because they awoke the box with Flash doing his thing, Steppenwolf knows exactly where to come. So Steppenwolf comes to Star Labs, which is where Silas is at, and he's looking for this box hard. Actually, one of the scientists at Star Labs is Ryan Choi, who in the comics becomes the Atom, which, like I said before, is like DC's version of the Ant-Man. And Snyder's plan was to actually use, like, he was gonna do an Atom movie, and it was gonna be all like Chinese East Asian cast, like, because Ryan Choi's East Asian. It was like gonna be this whole super cool, like, kind of Black Panther was a lot of African American. It was gonna be like that, but for Atom. Really, really interesting. And like I said, he's like the version of Ant-Man, so he can grow really large, or he can go like super small, which is super interesting. So anyway, like I said, Superman kind of friggin' tripped out once he kind of came back to life. He came back with amnesia. He couldn't really remember who he was. So he's looking at the Justice League going like, who the fuck are these guys? And Cyborg, because he has a kind of a symbiotic relationship with like his robot kind of part of his body, it actually he can't control every aspect of his armor, and it actually takes over. And because it senses Superman is a threat, and because it also saw that vision, Cyborg had that vision, Cyborg's armor actually attacks Superman. So now Superman's cheesed. He's fighting the Justice League. He's freaking zapping Wonder Woman, throwing Flash around. It's actually one of the cool scenes. Yeah. Right? Exactly. You know what I'm going to say? Yeah. Flash is running, and Flash is, because he knows he's the fastest person in the world, he's running in like no worries. And then all of a sudden you see Superman like look at him, and like his whole head moves, and friggin' Flash is like, what? Oh shit. And anyway, they like smash each other, like, cause in the comics, Superman and Flash have like races because they're two of the fastest dudes in all the comics. So it's always a funny thing. Actually, at the end of the first Justice League in 2017, there's a little scene where Flash and Superman race each other, and it's probably the fucking best part of the whole movie. But anyway, Superman obviously dusts the Justice League. He's literally about to fucking laser beam Batman, our boy, Batman. He's going to laser beam him. And in that vision, or that time where Flash came back to Superman that I mentioned back from Batman versus Superman, the Flash not only says, "You got to put us together, find us," he also says, "You're right about him, aka Superman. Lois Lane is the key. Find Lois. She's the key." And then he fucking dips. And that's when he's like, "Am I too soon?" Because Batman's literally sitting there like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Am I too soon?" Super cool. But so that's when Martian Manhunter kind of steps in. He knows about that and gets Lois Lane to show up, and friggin' Batman finds Lois Lane. She shows up and literally saves Batman's life because Superman recognized her and was like, "Oh shit." Started the seed anyway for him to kind of start remembering who he was, which I thought was kind of cool. They both fucking take off to Kansas. So while this is happening, Silas Stone takes the mother box because he knows where it is, and he knows Steppenwolf is trying to get it, and Silas tries to destroy it. He's like shooting it with a laser beam, and unfortunately he fucking dies in the process. Like, Cyborg's right there trying to save him, and he literally witnesses his pops getting friggin' shot by a laser. Sucks. And you know what sucks even harder is that friggin' Steppenwolf still gets it. Steppenwolf still got the box, and I always thought that was kind of a bummer. But Silas Stone actually died. The laser beam he shot it with actually like heated up the core of the mother box so much so that they could trace it with one of Batman's satellites. So he kind of died like helping out, which is interesting. So anyway, so now they're hunting this box, they're trying to find it. They know it's in this like Chernobyl ass place. While this is happening, Superman, like I said, goes to Kansas to kind of remember who he was. And I always thought, I look back on it, I kind of thought of that like as a little bit of a Joseph Campbell kind of thing, where it's like a hero's journey, you know, and he dies and he's resurrected. It's almost Jesus. It's almost Christian, where he's kind of resurrected and comes back and doesn't really know who he is, and he kind of has to like go home and like reintegrate his life and be like, this is who I am, and kind of remember and talk to his mom and be like, all right, this is who I am, which is I thought was kind of interesting. Superman finally gets to wear the black suit, which is super cool, which is like, again, from the comics. He doesn't have in the comics, he kind of has long hair and a beard because, again, he's been dead for a while, and he's been out of the game for a bit, so he kind of grew his flow. Can't see his barber. But they didn't do it in the Snyder cut, unfortunately. But again, if everyone's been counting, now friggin' Steppenwolf has all three mother boxes, and he creates the Unity. Brutal. So now that basically calls on Darkseid. He knows it's happening. Steppenwolf knows the anti-life is carved into the surface of Earth. He's told Darkseid that he got the mother boxes. Darkseid friggin' shows up, talks to him, and he tells him, "Come to Earth. I got the anti-life. Let's do this thing," right? So anyway, Justice League is their whole plan now. With or without Superman, because they're not even sure if he even knows what the hell's going on. But their whole idea is they're going to try and get Victor or Cyborg into the Unity to try and split it up. He's going to use his cyborg powers to try and get in there and tear it apart. But to do this, he needs Barry to create enough power, or the Flash to create enough power for him to actually get into the box. So basically, Barry just starts doing fucking laps. He just starts running around this place to start building up this charge. And luckily Superman comes back right as Steppenwolf is about to fucking chop Cyborg. Superman comes out and he fucking kicks the shit out of Steppenwolf. And then but while this is happening, while Barry's doing these laps, Cyborg's like, "I'm ready, Barry, let's go." And Barry's like, "I can't hold this any longer." One of these parademons, which are basically like the the henchmen of Darkseid, which are all these souls that he's captured, and he's turned into these like weird flying creatures. But again, mostly in these movies, they're henchmen and they're goons, and they don't have a lot of, like skill. They're usually shitty, like AKA stormtroopers in Star Wars. They're the worst shot. They suck. They can't shoot any, like they have no aim. They're brutal. But this one dude, they call him Gary the Parademon, literally fucking shoots Flash while he's running and nails him with a shot. So Flash goes flying. He's like, fuck, I can't help Cyborg. And bro, the unity happens and it explodes the Earth. But right at this moment, Flash sees this happen, and again, Flash is considered one of the most powerful superheroes in all of the comic books. He can phase through things, so he can move so fast. His molecules and his atoms can literally phase through matter. So he can like go through walls. He can go through anything. So he's phasing through this explosion, and he's like, "Fuck, I gotta break." He doesn't say fuck, but he's like, "I gotta break my rule," which is he's gonna run faster than the speed of light. And so he starts running faster than the speed of light, and as he's running back in time. So like all the stuff that was exploded is like starting to like build under his feet. It's such a cool scene. He's like talking about, he's like, Dad, if you're ever wondering, like your son was one of the good guys, like, cause he thinks he's going to die. Cause he thinks if he runs fast enough, he's going to die. So anyway, he's trying to do that to like get back. So as he's running back, the scene is like building in front of him, and like the box is like unexploding essentially. And he's going back in time. And then as he gets to that moment where Cyborg wanted him to give him the power, he gives him the power. They split apart the Unity. Superman comes in there. They bust it apart. Boom. Fucking Cyborg gets, Cyborg opens everything. Steppenwolf gets absolutely owned by Superman. Just gets friggin' dummied. And at the end, they friggin' Wonder Woman friggin' slices Steppenwolf's head off. And it's funny because in the Joss Whedon cut, they use the exact same CGI, but she just like cuts him. She doesn't like kill him. She just does like this weird little jump move and like kind of slices him. But in the Snyder cut, it's the same motion CGI wise, and she fucking slices his head off. And then it goes in right in front of Darkseid, and Darkseid doesn't give a shit. It's pretty funny. But anyway, badass scene. Super cool. Basically, when the Unity is created, we get to see Darkseid for the first time. He also has Desaad, and he also has this other character named Granny Goodness, which is one of those like funny things that she existed in the comics, but they kind of just have to talk about her. And it's like, you can't change the name. It's a character in the comics. Like, what are you going to do, right? So, but really interesting to see them for the first time. And because they kind of went, because Flash did this whole move where they went back in time, Darkseid literally witnessed all this shit go down. So he kind of knows that everyone's powerful. But the other thing is that with Barry being able to go back in time, it opened up something called the Flashpoint series, which is a super cool series that some of the DC writers created, where Flash actually goes back in time and he changes certain things about the past that change the future. So I don't know exactly what he does, but for instance, the story of Batman, as many of the comic book nerds like myself know, Bruce Wayne and his parents are walking out from a theater in Gotham, and this dude comes out. Some comic books it's the Joker, sometimes it's just a random guy, but anyway, this dude comes out and shoots both of Bruce's parents, and that's what turns him into Batman, because he witnessed that and he wants to stop crime. But because Barry or the Flash went back in time and changed something, the robber shoots Bruce. And then Bruce's dad becomes Batman, and his mom goes crazy and becomes the Joker. But yeah, wow. This is why this is huge, because it can open up. Now we know the Flash can go back in time. He could do shit like this, which is wild, right? Super cool. And there's other stories with all of the other different superheroes that are just as trippy. in that. It's called the Flashpoint series. Very, very cool. Anyway, so Justice League basically wins. Darkseid is like, fuck, the Unity is destroyed. His partner's like, Desaad is like, what are you gonna do? And he's like, we're gonna do it the old-fashioned way. And he's like, gather the Armada. So he's basically gonna try and like invade Earth. So Snyder's opening up things to continue, but Warner Brothers has said that it's not going to continue. So everyone listening, hashtag restore the Snyderverse. It's already over like 1.5 million hashtags, tweets, posts right now, which is surpassed like Avengers Endgame. It's surpassed Restore the Snyder Cut even, which is freaking wild. So anyway, that's basically where the meat and potatoes of the movie ends. Lex Luthor, though, actually they show a scene where he ends up escaping Arkham, which is where Batman put him, and he recruits Deathstroke, who's a villain from the DC canon. He's actually from the League in the DC universe. He was going to be from the League of Shadows, which is also where Batman was from, and they had this beef about Deathstroke's son or something. That would have been really cool. But anyway, Lex Luthor's idea was going to start the Legion of Doom, which in DC, I guess in Marvel they have the Sinister Six, but basically DC's Legion of Doom is like the bad Justice League. So usually, again, all these comic book teams, they have all these different iterations, but usually in your Legion of Doom you're going to get Lex Luthor, Deathstroke, Black Manta, which is one of the Aquaman villains, Brainiac, which is actually which was going to be the villain in Superman Lives, super cool. Cheetah, which is the villain in the new Wonder Woman movie, who was played by Kristen Wiig. She did a fucking phenomenal job. And then Sinestro, which is actually a Green Lantern villain. So hopefully, eventually, maybe they'll give Snyder another try. Maybe he'll be able to do a couple more movies. Maybe he'll be able to do a Green Lantern movie. And all this Legion of Doom stuff would be super cool. But essentially the movie ends with this nightmare scene where it's this vision of, essentially the story is Lois Lane was killed. Lois Lane dies and Superman kind of goes nuts. And then Darkseid kind of takes him under his wing. And the whole thing is basically now the superheroes of the world are trying to actually stop Superman. So it's what Batman feared was going to happen in Batman versus Superman. It's like if that came to fruition. And in the scene, basically it's Batman, Cyborg, Flash, Mera, because Aquaman is killed, Deathstroke, who's a bad guy, and the Joker. They're all in this one team together, which is wild because obviously the Joker and Batman never work together, right? Super cool. Again, opens up a lot of stuff. It sounds like Warner Brothers ain't going to let it happen. Again, if anyone's listening, get out there, tweet that Restore the Snyderverse, because it seems like a really cool thing. And hey, it happened with Restore the Snyder Cut alone, right? So, people are out there, people are listening. It's amazing what technology can actually do and allow that to happen, right? So anyway, I know that was nice and in depth. So if you never watched the movie, I know I went into a lot, but there's so much more to it. The visual, I obviously can't explain how amazing some of the visual aspects and the cinematography are. The acting's really well done. Again, great job, Zack Snyder and everyone involved. Thanks for listening. Again, if you want to support, hit up Bigmark, the Bigmark Pod on patreon.com. Like it, subscribe, and everyone have a great day. Cheers. Peace.